yum. Yum, yum.
Gremlins began in a small, dingy apartment where the creator of the screenplay for Gremlins, Chris Columbus, lived in the early 1980s. Chris had little money at the time and struggled to get by. The New York apartment was so bad that it had rodent problems. Columbus recalled the vermin sounded like a platoon of mice that would come out, and to hear them skitter around in the blackness was really creepy. Every night, Columbus feared letting his hand hang over the bed because many times he had been woken up when one of the hairy rodents rubbed across his hand. After many of these experiences, he began to wonder, what if one of the scavengers was actually something else and not a rat or mouse? This was the germ for the Gremlins project. Chris would also visit Chinatown often, as the food was cheap, and as he wrote his project, he began thinking of a name for his little monsters and came up with the name Mogwai, because in Chinese that meant devil. He was also working on another project, which was optioned. This project would later become his first released film, which was called Reckless, starring Daryl Hannah and Aidan Quinn, and it was a horrid experience for Columbus. He was banned from the set by director James Foley, who was altering his script into something unrecognizable. It wasn't my best work. I intended it to be semi-biographical, and the film was based on my attempts to break free. But the director turned it into a clumsy teen sex drama, and the experience was so degrading. During the post-production of Gremlins, Columbus saw the first screening of Reckless and cried after seeing it. When the Gremlins script was finished, the concept for it was a hard rated R horror film, and it went something like this. Rand Peltzer is in Hong Kong looking for an unusual gift for his son and is approached by an Oriental man who leads him into a dark room where he shows him a mogwai that does tricks, including jumping out of the box, getting things, and giggling a lot. Rand buys it for $100, and the seller tells him that the creature likes raw meat and that it must be kept indoors because sunlight will kill it. During the return flight to the United States, Rand asks a stewardess if she has ever heard the word mogwai and what does it mean. The stewardess states it means devil. When Peltz arrives at Kingston Falls, Pennsylvania, with a population of 6,122 souls, the credits begin as various areas of the town are shown with snow falling and Christmas images. Then we cut to a bank where Billy Peltzer is working. He is described as having wire-rimmed glasses and slicked, dirty blonde hair. His next customer is Mrs. Deagle, whose husband manages the Sparkle Market, and Billy can't cash her personal checks because her last check hasn't cleared. She makes a scene, and the manager arrives and placates her while forcing Billy to apologize. We are also introduced to another teller named Tracy Allen, who Billy has a crush on. Tracy is not like the beloved Phoebe Cates character Kate because she has less ownership and is more a damsel in distress type in this script. She is friends with the security guard of the bank, whose name is Gary, and he is a real macho jerk who thinks Tracy is his girl when she really isn't. Gary loves demeaning Billy whenever he gets a chance. In the script, Billy is set up as an intelligent bookworm loner who also dreams of writing and is real big into medieval history. Because he's such a loner, that is one of the reasons he is so close to young Pete, played by Corey Feldman later in the film, because he is one of the few people in town that take him seriously. Billy and Pete go to an antique shop, and when there, Billy buys a replica sword from the shopkeeper. Billy's mother is also vastly different from the badass mom we knew in the film. She is slightly overweight and pops Valiums constantly. She has a bouncy relationship with her son as well. It is also revealed that she wants Billy to stay with them, and she has issues over letting him go and letting him move on. It is then that Rand comes home and shows them the Mogwai, and the dog Barney hates it. The Mogwai shows off some tricks, but Billy doesn't take to the creature. When the mom takes a picture, the flash causes the Mogwai to jump, and it scratches Billy on the cheek, to which Billy calls the creature a little bastard. And then the Mogwai runs to Rand for comfort. In the following scenes, we see that Billy doesn't like the Mogwai at all. He tells it to shut up because it sings while he is trying to write. He has no problem shining a light on it either when it annoys him by trying to cuddle on his arm or being on his desk. There is even a point where Billy has his newly purchased sword in his hand, and he stares at the Mogwai threateningly. The little creature shows fear and has water in its eyes, to which Billy feels guilty, and then cuddles with the creature to comfort it. Billy comes off very mean to the Mogwai, and while he sleeps, there is a scene where the green eyes of the Mogwai are staring at him in darkness. The next night, Pete spills water on the Mogwai like the film, and 4 new Mogwai appear, though none of them have a stripe. Billy can't believe what happened, and drops some water on another one. 3 more Mogwai appear. Billy then splashes milk on one of them, but nothing happens, and Pete and Billy muse that only regular water will do the trick. Billy says Pete can take one home, but the moment he takes one, it screams, and the other Mogwai leap at Pete to keep it with them. Billy raises concerns to his dad that they know nothing of these creatures, but his father thinks they are cute and likes them. It is then that Billy takes one of the Mogwai to biology teacher Roy Hansen at the local high school. Roy tells him they only separate when they hunt for food, and they are drawn to water, and that if the water is below 25 degrees, it does not affect them. He states there is no species like this creature in the whole world. That night, Billy wakes up to eating sounds, and he grabs his sword and heads downstairs. It is there he sees the Mogwai eating his dog while they smile and giggle while Billy screams. In response, Rand gathers the Mogwai into a thick bag and throws them in the attic, and he padlocks the door, stating, "Tomorrow we'll take them out in the sun and finish them off." In the morning, they go into the attic and discover the Mogwai have formed into cocoons that won't budge, and when Billy swings a bat at one, the bat breaks in 2. Even a gas torch does not affect the cocoons. They are impervious. Then Rand does something really stupid. He gets on a plane for business, leaving unknown cocoons in his attic with his family at home. The next day, Mrs. Deagle returns to the bank and starts problems with Billy again, causing him to get fired after he refuses to apologize. As this is happening, the cocoons hatch while Mom is baking cookies in the house. Then she hears the attic door upstairs. She goes up and is attacked by the creatures as she is dragged in the attic, kicking and screaming, and in a few seconds we hear chewing, swallowing, and giggling. When Billy gets home, he is greeted by his mother's head rolling down the stairs towards him. Billy races into his room and grabs his sword. Like the movie, the post-cocoon Mogwai are reptilian-like, and they are very evil and angrier. Billy kills some of the Mogwai with his sword, and like the movie, there are many scenes similar. One throws china at him. He is then attacked by 3 Mogwai who were hiding in Christmas stockings, and he stabs one until it chokes on its own blood, which is gruesomely described in the script. He burns one in the fireplace. Instead of his mom killing all the gremlins in the kitchen with a blender and a microwave, it is Billy who does it. He tries to call the police, but the Mogwai have cut the phone line. Billy kills all but one of the Mogwai, and it jumps out of the window into the blizzard-filled night. Billy chases after the footprints with sword in hand. We then cut to an 8-year-old building a snowman, and the evil gremlin pops out of the snowman, grabbing her and pulling her inside it. But Billy is close behind and sees this. He has a tug of war with the creature and frees her. Then he hacks the snowman to pieces, but the Mogwai escapes. Billy chases after it while the girl explains what happened to her mother. The mother states, "I think you've been playing too many of those video games." Then the gremlin spots carolers, and one of them is Pete. The creature grabs the boy by the scarf and drags him into the woods, where it kills him by tearing chunks out of his neck and eating them. The carolers continue to sing in the distance as they only notice their tenor voice dropped out. Billy finds the body of Pete and chases the creature into the local YMCA, where the pool scene occurs, and droves of gremlins reproduce as Billy flees to survive. The next scene has Billy trying to convince the sheriff and his deputy officer Brent about the situation. They think it's a joke. He shows them his scars from the creatures, but they say it looks like dog bites. The sheriff then says that Billy has an active imagination and dismisses him by saying he reads too many books and that Dungeons and Dragons are for 5-year-old kids, not men. After demanding that they see the dead bodies, the sheriff sighs and sends Brent to the YMCA and then orders him to check out the Peltzer house. Billy leaves with Officer Brent. Outside the YMCA, Brent exits the car with his pistol drawn while Billy waits. Within moments, there are gunshots as Brent is eaten alive. The YMCA doors burst open as hundreds of gremlins flee into the night. Billy turns on the police siren and races away, stopping only at Mr. Futterman's house to warn him to turn on all lights. Billy even tries to warn the Deagles, but both of them are pig-headed. Billy flees to warn others in the police car as the area is overrun with gremlins and the Deagles are at ground zero and are eaten alive. The sheriff is joined by security guard Gary, and after a few phone calls, they leave the police station to check things out, and after they leave, the phone begins ringing off the hook. The two drive off, with Gary overjoyed and joking about gremlins. Frank rolls his window down to see, since the snow is so thick, he can't see out the front window. Then a gremlin jumps in the car and goes crazy. The car then crashes and flips over in a ditch. Billy then saves Tracy by using a ladder to reach her bedroom window, and the two drive off in the police car. They then find the cop car and Gary is still alive. He saves him, and then Gary goes in the cop car and starts kissing Tracy, who for some reason does not resist him. Billy just drives away, staring ahead. They stop at the antique shop where Billy bought his sword, and Billy states that the creatures are drawn to water, and most likely they're heading for the water tower. Gary begins yelling at Billy that it is all his fault, and the two fight. The fight is broken up, and Tracy comforts Gary, not Billy. She is a really stupid character. Then the lights go out, and you can hear gremlins giggling. Soon, windows are broken, and the group redeploy into a storage room to hold up. It is then that the owner of the store states that he hasn't been this afraid since he was 6 and recalls how his father died in a chimney pretending to be Santa Claus. This, of course, would later be turned into Kate's tale. Scared, Tracy wants to sleep near Billy, and Gary is jealous at this. They survive till morning, and they open the door to find sunlight. However, the store is wrecked, and snow is 3 feet thick outside. They need food, so they head towards a McDonald's, which is a block away. At the restaurant, they see dead people who were eaten by gremlins. They also see ruins that was once a town. Billy makes them food, and they eat burgers and fries while trying to figure out where the gremlins went to hide from the sunlight. They decide they are at a movie theater, and they head there after gathering supplies to blow up said building. Gary once worked there. When they arrive, it is getting dark, and Tracy takes Billy's hand, frustrating Gary more. Then, like the movie, the gremlins are watching Snow White while the others rig the theater to blow. After rigging everything, they are discovered and attacked by gremlins, and Gary, being the slime he is, abandons them while Billy and Tracy escape just in time as the theater explodes. A confrontation with Gary ensues, but he is killed when gremlins attack him, eating him alive as Billy and Tracy flee in the police car. They discover a wounded gremlin in the back of the seat, and Tracy keeps Billy's sword blade on it so it doesn't move. Billy claims that if they keep it alive, the rest of the gremlins will follow them, and they can lead them away from the tower. When stopping at a gas station, the car breaks down thanks to the Mogwai messing with it. They lock the creature in a toolbox and run towards a greenhouse as dawn approaches. They enter the building and spot a tree, and the two climb up it as gremlins enter. The tree falls, and Billy is surrounded, but then the gremlins stop as sun hits the building, and they begin to die by melting. Billy kisses Tracy, and when they get outside, Billy collapses in the snow. Then, Rand Peltzer is sitting in the hospital, and Billy is covered in bandages. Billy wakes up and suddenly panics as he yells about a locked toolbox that he forgot in the greenhouse. The doctors put him under, thinking he is in shock. Then we cut to workers cleaning out the greenhouse, and one of them comes across a toolbox. The worker decides to keep the toolbox and puts it in his van. When he drives away, the toolbox moves, and he stops the vehicle and throws the box away from him. The box falls down a hill and into a lake, where it sinks in the water as Mogwais giggle and the credits roll. While looking for films to produce for his newly found Amblin Entertainment Company, Steven Spielberg would often take 20 scripts home at a time and read them, and one of them was Gremlins, which he was quoted saying,
"It's one of the most original things I've come across in many years, which is why I bought it and gave it to Joe to make into a movie."
He reached out to Chris Columbus via telephone, and when Chris got the call, he thought it was a joke, and Steven had to convince him the call was real. When Chris flew to California for a meeting, Steven stated he wanted the script to be rewritten into a family-like film that was not rated R. At first, Chris was skeptical, but he was with Spielberg and deferred to his judgment. Eventually, the film would go through about 8 drafts, and each time a new draft occurred, the film got better and better. Nearing the end of the drafts, Steven stated that he wanted Gizmo to remain innocent so that the audience would root for the little guy. This change was so late that the effects crew needed to adapt because they hadn't made any Gizmo puppets for later scenes. For a director, Spielberg thought Tim Burton was perfect due to his macabre style of direction used on Frankenweenie. The problem was Burton didn't do a big-budget film before, so Spielberg opted for another fit. Joe Dante had made Piranha for Roger Corman and then made The Howling. Spielberg enjoyed them both, even though they were not smash successes. He also did a short for the Twilight Zone movie, so Steven was familiar with him. Before this time, Joe didn't know that Universal Studios once looked at blocking Piranha's film release because they thought it was ripping off Jaws. However, it was Steven Spielberg himself who saw the film before its release and told Universal to back off because it was a parody and not something that competed with Jaws.
Sharks come alone. Piranha come in thousands.
Dante recalled he had little money at the time when Spielberg reached out to him. He received the script thinking it was a joke, just like Columbus. To make Gremlins originally, the idea of using monkeys in costumes was mentioned, but quickly forgotten when they tested a monkey and it freaked out and pooped everywhere because it had a mask over its face. Soon they decided to go the animatronic route. They hired Chris Wallace to achieve their goals. Most of the animatronic puppets were made waist up with tons of wires and several operators. A lot of camera tricks were used in this film as well, and it was a great leap for the time. For the casting, Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates knew each other before working on Gremlins. They were both the final callbacks for the Paul Mazursky film Tempest, and both lost the part to it. They had what Zach referred to as a brother-sister relationship, and when they got together again during the audition for Gremlins, Zach hadn't had much success obtaining big-screen parts like her. He stated he just wanted to stay on the film with Phoebe and to soak in what he thought was a fleeting moment.
I put my head on Phoebe's shoulder and I kind of looked up and went sigh, like it was what a romantic scene and how pretty is this girl and how happy am I doing this audition and everything.
And when Steven Spielberg saw the tapes, he pointed at the screen and said, "Look, he's already in love with her. Hire them." Another person up for the part of Billy was Emilio Estevez. Spielberg passed on Emilio because he felt the actor was internalizing his performance. Principal photography began on April 27, 1983, and it would wrap on July 1983. At the time of filming, Steven was busy shooting Indiana Jones 2, and as a result, Dante was left to his own devices with little supervision and notes, which he was very appreciative of. Whenever the studio would try to interfere with Dante, he would just contact Spielberg, who would then tell the studio to lay off. Filming took place on the Warner Brothers backlot, and since Dante was an old film nut, he didn't want to hide the fact that the movie was on a set because he wanted a more timeless feel. This set had been used since the 1940s and was the same set used for Music Man, East of Eden, and the Dukes of Hazzard's TV show, and of course, Back to the Future. The set was covered in gypsum or white sand, and sometimes ice chips was thrown on top to help make footprints when they were needed. You can often notice Billy sweating because it was filmed during the spring and early summer of 1983. Billy is often in a thick coat, and you don't see anyone's breathing like they would in a cold environment. During filming, there was a lot of pressure on the actor to get takes right when gremlins were involved in the shot because the films survived on the performance of the creatures and effects. So if a shot was perfect with the gremlins, Often it could not be matched, and therefore whatever take was best with the Gremlins would inevitably be chosen for the film. As a result, the performers were always on their toes to give the best performance they could because they knew they might have a poor take in the movie to compensate for the effects. The performer with the biggest challenge was Zach, because if you watch the film, his mouth is often open, and Dante kept telling him to close his mouth while shooting.
The editor, Tina Hirsch, used to come up to me and say, can't you get him to keep his mouth closed? I mean, he's always got his mouth open, and I got to cut around it. And so
I read a book about Montgomery Clift about how he, of course, when you're 19, you want to be like Brando and Clift and Dean. They said he had this incredible intensity coming out of his eyes. So I have contact lenses, so I'd focus really hard on getting intensity out of my eyes. And of course, my mouth would drop open, so I looked like this big guppy. See, right there. There you go.
Well, I mean, luckily it's not a fatal flaw. Although I think now that we've told people about it, there's probably going to be parties where people run the movie and
count the number of times in my mouth. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, look, it's open.
Take a drink every time your mouth is open.
When it came to the Gremlins performance, Frank Welker did all the Gremlin voices except for Gizmo, and he suggested trying out comedian Howie Mandel, who never did a voice for a film before.
I'll come in and try, but I really don't see me as Gizmo. Actually, this is my real voice.
I do this so people don't make fun of me.
Warner Brothers had zero understanding of what they had with Gremlins. They didn't understand the comedy or horror elements, and since Steven Spielberg and Joe Dante had final cut approval in their contract, the studio could do nothing. They actually said to Steven Spielberg that they thought there were too many Gremlins in the film. I kid you not. They actually said this. Steven Spielberg's reply was perfect. Should we cut them out and call it people? The studio even tried to push taking out Phoebe Cates' monologue about Christmas, but in the end, Spielberg let Dante decide. He was told either lose Phoebe's monologue or Judge Reinhold's scene where he was found in the bank vault. Dante would cut that sequence, which we will cover when we go over the finished movie itself. Gremlins cost about $11 million. And Warner Brothers thought the film would be a failure, but after the first screening of the film, the audiences went nuts in enjoyment, and Warner Brothers quickly realized they had a huge movie on their hands. Both Gremlins and Indiana Jones had some very questionable content, such as the beating heart in Indy, and the microwave scene for Gremlins. The MPAA thought it was too much, and Spielberg suggested a rating between PG and R to be introduced on July 1st, 1984. It was a big media event at the time. The debate most likely gave more ticket sales and exposure to Indiana Jones and Gremlins at the time.
For this reason, industry observers say the new rating has no meaning unless parents use it to determine what their kids will see. Sandy Kenyon, CNN, Hollywood.
The first official film to have a PG-13 rating was Red Dawn, which was released on August 10th, 1984. But that's a movie we should probably talk about on another video. For now, that's the end of this video. Next up, we will cover the film itself to completion, and until then, don't let your critters eat fireworks. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe, and if you really like what you see here, click super thanks. It helps the channel.